It's the 3rd of August 2023. I am Dr. Rajiv Siram, physician and advocate for bioethics and human rights attached to the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Advocacy Network, TTCAN. On behalf of our network of civil advocates, clinicians, labour leaders and theologians, I am respectfully appealing to the Honourable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago to abstain from signing the WHO's proposed Pandemic Preparedness Convention, otherwise known as the treaty in its present form, and to reject the proposed amendments to the International Health Regulations, IHR. Both instruments contain articles that can facilitate the erosion of human rights, pharmaceutical safety, and public health sovereignty during public health emergencies of international concern. Specifically, 5 IHR issues demand immediate redress. 1. To limit the unjustifiable invocation or protraction of public health emergencies, we humbly request that the Honourable Prime Minister rejects amendments to Article 12 of the IHR, which is being reworded to marginalise the input of public health experts in WHO's Emergency Committee, and negate the need for agreement by state parties in the declaration of public health emergencies of international concern. With these amendments, all power to declare such emergencies will be completely vested in the office of the WHO Director General. There can be no justification for the consolidation of such power in this office, which, if corrupted, can then act unilaterally in declaring or prolonging public health emergencies. 2. In deference to the fundamental human rights and freedoms protected under our Constitution, we humbly request that the Honourable Prime Minister decisively rejects the amendments to Article 3, which proposes to strike off the clause, quote, "with full respect for the dignity, human rights and fundamental freedoms of persons," end quote, replacing it with the nebulous terms equity, inclusivity and coherence. We are deeply concerned that the intentional omission of universal references to human rights can be interpreted to unjustifiably trammel our citizens' right to freedom of movement and assembly, the right to work, freedom of conscience, and bodily integrity during public health emergencies. 3. In protecting freedom of speech and in fostering the exchange of crucial information and evidence-based perspectives which inform public health policy, we humbly request that the Honourable Prime Minister rejects amendments to Articles 7 and 44, which enables WHO to, quote, "counter misinformation and disinformation, and collaborate in countering the dissemination of false and unreliable information about public health events in the media and social networks." Following a litany of false COVID-19 vaccine claims that masqueraded as authoritative truth, example, the disparaging of safety signals, myocarditis and thrombosis, and the WHO-backed promulgation of approval and safety statements for emergency listed products, the IHR should now omit any clauses that positions the WHO as an arbiter of scientific truth. The WHO should not be allowed to assume authority in labelling any communication as misinformation or disinformation. 4. To prevent the potential misuse of private and confidential information, example, a citizen's vaccine status, that can be misused for the purpose of medical segregation and discrimination, we humbly request that the Prime Minister rejects amendments to Article 35, which seeks to introduce and enforce the use of a QR code-based digital vaccine pass for travel. While such technologies can improve security and convenience, until and unless the Digital Protection Act is updated to prevent the misuse of private and confidential medical data, any form of digital health passports should be rejected. And lastly, number 5, to safeguard public health sovereignty, we humbly request that the Honourable Prime Minister rejects the proposed amendments to IHR Article 4, which compels the state to establish an international health regulation focal point tasked with the implementation of WHO health regulations and legislated with, quote, the authority and resources to perform its functions, end quote, in each country. These functions may include surveillance and enforcement of WHO-mandated lockdowns, school and business closures, compliance with pandemic-related products including emergency-listed vaccines, vaccine uptake quotas, and workplace vaccine mandates. As evidenced by the last pandemic, the WHO's injudicious guidance culminated in numerous deleterious public health policies. For example, protracted school closures, aggressive promotion of poorly tested emergency-listed vaccines in children and healthy young adults, failure in pharmaceutical safety surveillance, and neglect of alarming vaccine safety signals, example myocarditis, circumvention of voluntary informed consent, vaccine-based segregation in education, in the workplace, and in other public spaces, dereliction in the investigation of COVID-19's origins, and censorship, suppression, and marginalization of clinicians and scientists who justifiably questioned WHO's pandemic orthodoxy. Notwithstanding the WHO's invaluable advisory functions during public health crises, the WHO is an unelected supranational bureaucracy which in recent years has accepted substantial funding from non-state parties like the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, both of which have a vested interest in the manufacture and sale of pandemic-related products and vaccines. This creates an unprecedented conflict of interest which can undermine the integrity of the WHO's policy guidance. For example, given the obvious safety concerns surrounding the emergency-listed vaccines which emerged over time, it is absurd that the WHO continues to promote 100% indemnification of drug manufacturers for any period of time, and it is unacceptable that the WHO expects governments to organize 100% liability financing for any and all pharmaceutical injuries that may result from the use of emergency-listed drugs and vaccines. These clauses, which are contained in the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty or Convention, obviously prioritize protection of the pharmaceutical industry over the welfare of the state and its citizens. Given the financial ties to the pharmaceutical lobby, the WHO must never, either directly or through intermediary bureaus, oversee the implementation of local public health policies which govern the use of emergency-listed drugs, vaccines, and other pandemic-related products. In principle and in practice, local public health policy must regard the right of the citizen to accept or to refuse an emergency-use pharmaceutical or vaccine without fear of reproach, humiliation, discrimination, or segregation. The WHO must never be granted power to enforce its health regulations in circumvention of parliamentary democracy or the will of the people. Following this litany of policy oversights and the apparent alignment with the pharmaceutical industry, any proposed pandemic accords should instead seek to decentralize power from the WHO and strengthen the autonomy and technical capacity of local public health authorities. The IHR amendments and the Pandemic Treaty should contain articles which buttress national drug regulatory agencies, example in Trinidad and Tobago, the Chemistry, Food and Drug, ensuring that these bodies have the capabilities and legislative powers to test drug safety and quality, and to police any clinicians, politicians, or pharmaceutical lobbyists who promote emergency use pharmaceuticals using false claims and marketing. The IHR must contain dedicated articles which prevent onerous, unempirical policies which segregate or discriminate against people based on medical status. It should contain articles which strengthen pharmacovigilance and bioethics tenets like voluntary informed consent. In closing, we humbly request that the Honourable Prime Minister gives urgent attention to the well-cited and justifiable concerns presented in our July 19th appeal. Of priority, The deleterious amendments to the IHR must be rejected before they come into permanent effect. Proposed amendments to IHR Articles 3, 4, 12, 35 and 44 should immediately be rejected to protect against infringements on fundamental human rights, freedom of speech, and public health sovereignty. No administration in good conscience and with genuine care for the public good can endorse the proposed amendments to the international health regulations in their present form. In accordance with the gravity of this urgent matter, we hope for a timely response to our appeal. Thank you for your attention.